issues because of the weather conditions. Because of the weather condition, the land network, some of the time electricity is not there. So we are facing certain problems, but we have some backup plans with us. So I don't think there will be any such problem.
Great that one is continuing with these activities even during these difficult times.
And so thank you for joining, and it's a great motivation for us that you and Professor Prashant Mishra sir has joined, and we are just gracing this occasion, and we are really very thankful to you people.
My pleasure, most welcome. Looking forward to my presentation as well as some questions and interaction. I would not like it to be a one-way traffic, so I will probably present for maybe 40 minutes or 45 minutes, and I'm hoping that there will be lots of questions.
Definitely, sir. It will be great learning for us. We expect that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our director, Professor Rakesh Sehgal sir, has joined. Dr. Sadaf will proceed the meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Dr. Sehgal. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think I'm not late.
No, sir, you're just in time, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining. Okay, dear participants, I'm Arif Anwar, faculty, Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management, NIT Srinagar. I welcome everybody. Very basic request to each and every participant here. Please keep your mic off all the time, your camera off all the time. We might experience some hurdles related to internet as we are sitting here in the valley, and we have some technical issues related with because of the weather conditions. Now, we'll just start in a few moments, and whenever the speakers will be coming up, and they'll definitely come up with their presentation, we can have this meeting very interactive, as Professor Saha has already told us, and he's very enthusiastic. So should we be? I'll ask Dr. Sadaf to proceed. In the meantime, we'll just join.
Honorable Director, NIT Srinagar, Professor Rakesh Sehgal, respected dignitaries, colleagues, and participants. A very good morning to all of you. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first International Conference on Contemporary Business Trends 2021, held by NIT Srinagar. The world that all of us are witnessing is an entirely changed place compared to what it was before the pandemic. No one ever imagined that COVID-19 would prove to be so fatal to the entire world, not only in terms of health, but economy as well. The economies world over are suffering. Global GDP is expected to plummet by almost 4.4% this year, and such a plunge is evident even in the Indian economy. The economic slowdown had begun before COVID-19 hit us, but has worsened due to COVID. The impact of COVID has been one of the worst faced by the world economies ever. All industrial sectors have faced unprecedented losses. The consumer spending trends have changed due to a change in their earnings, and thus, businesses world over are facing tremendous disruptions and unexpected challenges. The business leaders are trying to fight the odds as there are unforeseen changes in business practices and consumer consumption patterns in global markets. Not just on the consumption front, the organizations are also facing challenges on fronts like disrupted supply chains, human resource management challenges, and inventory and stock management related issues. Globally, the leaders are trying to understand and resolve the challenges COVID-19 has brought us face to face with. Different tools are being used by organizations to keep serving their customers without compromising on quality and at the same time trying to minimize the costs. To fight these challenges, businesses all over the world have seen a surge in the use of technology as a part of their effort to fight the odds. We all would have been face to face had COVID not been there. In addition to organizations and their leaders around the world, academicians and researchers are also trying to contribute in the fight against COVID-created market challenges. A lot of research papers and articles have been published covering the impact of COVID on various aspects of global economies and societies. It was this notion that led us to organize this conference. The International Conference on Contemporary Business Trends aims at addressing the challenges and issues that must be discussed and analyzed in order to facilitate and improve business management globally. The International Conference on Business Trends thus intends to provide a platform for the academicians and practitioners to discuss these and related issues. We aim to discuss issues related to areas like marketing, entrepreneurship, human resource management, Make in India, Digital India, financial management, and many other topics. The idea is to contribute towards providing some strategies to counter the issues faced by economies and understand how technology can help us in overcoming the obstacles COVID-19 has uncovered. These and other relevant questions will be deliberated at the conference. It is with this objective, the International Conference on Contemporary Business Trends has been organized by the Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management. The department, ever since the introduction of MBA course last year, has organized many events in a short span for the management community of the Valley. We conducted workshops, STPs, organized webinars, expert lectures, and have had internationally acclaimed speakers like Professor Parasuraman with us, and have tried to get the international exposure for the management research community of the Valley, as well as our students of MBA. The department, in collaboration with the Innovation Incubation and Entrepreneurship Development Center, NIT Srinagar, also conducted an international workshop on innovation, which included participants and speakers from different regions of the world. The International Conference on Contemporary Business Trends is our latest effort to provide a platform of international level to the researchers and academicians from the Valley to connect and share ideas with the national and international scholars, researchers, and academicians. I hope the conference succeeds in achieving its objectives. I sincerely thank you all for your participation. I would now like to invite Professor Abdul Leman for the welcome address. Professor Leman is the head Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management, NIT Srinagar. Sir, over to you. Professor Liman, sir, are you with us?
Thank you, Dr. Saraf. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to one and all present here. It's my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to you all and a special welcome to our guest of honor, Professor Rakesh Saigalji, Director, National Institute of Technology, Srinagar. Professor Ghulam Ashraful Harmayan, Dean Research and Consultancy. Professor Najibuddin, Dean Academic Affairs, Heads of Departments and Centers. Professor Prashant Mishra and Professor Arvind Sahai, our keynote speakers. I, along with the family of Humanities, Social Science and Management, appreciate your presence at this conference. The conference targets the contemporary business trends and aims to discuss the issues arising out of the unexpected changes in the prevailing scenario. I begin with the following quote of Washington Irving. There is a certain relief in change, even though it is from bad to worse, as I have often found in traveling in a stagecoach, that it is often a comfort to shift one's position and be bruised in a new place. Dear friends, students, scholars, academicians, and business tycoons, global GDP is expected to plummet by almost 4.4%, as has been told by Dr. Sadal also, and such a plunge is evident even in Indian economy. Economic slowdown before COVID-19 had already initiated impacting developing economies across the globe. The situation for these economies worsened by the impact of COVID globally. The global economic contractions resulting from this pandemic have been far worse than economic recessions faced by the world till date. It has affected and disrupted businesses across the world on a large scale, leaving them to be in a deplorable state. As counter-mechanism to fight the odds, businesses have to resort to an increased usage of technology on multiple fronts. Changes in business practices and consumer consumption patterns are visible around the world. Emerging market economies have been mostly hit hard due to the global economic downturn and COVID-19 situation. Because of the economic slowdown in the past few quarters, because of the economic slowdown in the past few quarters and the sudden impact of COVID-19 has led to global economic contractions. The economists are still calculating the severity and are unsure about the exact amount of loss being faced by each nation. As the counter mechanism to fight the odds, the business organizations, practitioners, researchers, and academicians have a bigger responsibility in order to revive the economy with the best possible strategy in every field. The revival of economy and business involves decoding of various contemporary issues faced by businesses across the globe. Hence, it is imperative to understand and study various issues affecting business management. In this view, the motto of the present conference on contemporary business trends is to provide a platform for the academicians, scholars, and practitioners to discuss such issues arising out of these changes. How can business grow? What are the business best strategies suited for the developing economies? How technology impacts modern businesses? And what are the contemporary trends in the field of management? These and other relevant questions will be deliberated at the conference. It is with this objective that ICCBT-2021 had called the interested scholars, academicians, and practitioners to present their ideas on this platform. I once again welcome you all on this platform and hope it would be a learning experience for all of us. Before I take leave, I want to quote Winston Churchill: to improve is to change, to, to be perfect is to change often. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you very much, Professor Laman. We're sorry, we have some technical issues sometimes, that's why we're not able to have the videos. I'd now like to invite Professor Najeebuddin for a special address. Professor Najeeb is the Dean Academic Affairs, NIT Srinagar. Professor Najeeb, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I hope everybody is able to listen.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. So, good morning, very good morning to all of you. Professor Dr. Rakesh Sahgal, Professor Liman, and Professor Prashant Mishra, Professor Arvind Sahai. I welcome all of you to this ICCBT-2021, which is being organized by Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, NIT Srinagar.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. You're not visible. I think your camera is probably turned off, or maybe there is some issue.
I think there will be some issue about the internet.
Right, sir. That's what I said at the beginning. We have issues, that's why sometimes we're not able to have the video. Please continue, sir.
Okay, because if I turn on my video, my audio may not be clear.
Yes, sure, sir. Please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, just few words about I again welcome all of you. You see, this 2020, it was full of uncertainty, I can say, and businesses worldwide have had to adapt to something like what we call as a new normal. Now, the things have not been easy, especially for small businesses, but however, with every challenge or each challenge, there comes an opportunity. Now, how businesses used to go about businesses, you see, yesterday is not same as today, and neither do we have the luxury to assume that the future will be the same as today. And that is what is challenging, because every day there are new trends emerging in the business world, which either influences or act as a force of initiating a change in the business community. Well, what we can say is that this first quarter of a new year, it may be a great time to imagine how markets and innovations will change over the years ahead. What technologies will be invented, we really don't know, and which ones will hit the mass adoption. Now, how are consumers' needs and desires changing? That we got to know recently about, I can say, COVID-19 has determined the needs of the consumers and desires. Now, these questions, it will help you, or it will help us to isolate the core trends for a new year and anticipate how they can enhance or disrupt your industry or create new opportunities that most people don't see yet. We have a whole new set of business trends emerging. Small businesses get stronger than ever. Now, investing in future trends easily ensures that business reaps the benefits tomorrow. You see, there are few business trends. As a person from technology or information technology side, because basically I'm an electronics person, I see just few upcoming small business trends which can help us to revive the business. You see, the first thing is like work from home or remote works will be the new normal. See, like whether it is business or institutions or any other organization, we have seen since last 1 year how the work from home has improved, or remote work, it will be now a new normal. Most of the things are, even we can see that this conference, almost I think everybody is sitting at home. Maybe except the professors who are from outside, they may be sitting in their offices. But presently in the Kashmir Valley, maybe the weather is one of the factors also. Everybody of us is sitting at home. Because it is so much of fog outside, it is very difficult to even venture out of our homes this time. The second trend, I think, digital economy. That is another trend which is there in place. The businesses, it will embrace the big economy. Now, emphasis on personalized customer services. Businesses prioritize the employee wellness. That is another trend. Small businesses, they can ramp up the digital marketing, which we have seen rather in this COVID-19 era. But there will be user reviews will be the king. How the business can be taken forward or what will be trend, one of the most important things will be the user review. But there is also something like, I don't know whether it is a disadvantage or what we should call it. So you see the stories, they take over the newsfeed. That is one of the major issues which I think ICCBT should discuss. Big data for small business. Although not much has been done in this direction yet, but the small businesses, they should see that how the big data will help them. And lastly, I can say one of the most important things which will determine our future trends in the business, that is the launch of 5G. These are a few things, I think, the business trends which we are seeing at present. So I have just outlined few of the things as a person from technology, which I feel that are very important for the future business trends. These are few words with which I think I can take leave of you. So again, welcome to all the participants to this virtual conference being held at NIT Srinagar. So thanks again all to Professor Liman, all the professors from outside, and specifically a big thanks to Professor Rakesh Saigal Saab, who is our worthy director and who has taken a lot of lead, I can say, in holding these virtual conferences, webinars, and other things. Thanks a lot, sir. So over to ICCBT 2021.
Thank you very much, Professor Najib. Yes, indeed, it would have been so much better had we all met face-to-face personally. But unfortunately, due to COVID, everything is virtual now. Thank you so much again, Professor Najib.
Okay.
I would now like to invite Professor Ghulam Ashraful Haramain for a special address. Professor Haramain is the Dean of Research and Consultancy, NIT Srinagar. Professor Haramain, sir, over to you. Professor Haramain, are you with us, sir?
I think he is not well.
Oh, okay.
Professor Harman is not keeping well for past few days.
Okay, sir.
I don't see. I don't see that he has joined.
Okay, I think let's move on. Let's see if he can join us later. I would now like to invite Professor Rakesh Saigal, the director, NIT Srinagar. Professor Saigal's invaluable support has made this event possible. On behalf of the department, I sincerely thank Professor Saigal for his consistent guidance and encouragement to make this department an epicenter of excellence. It gives me immense pleasure to invite Professor Rakesh Saigal for this special address. Professor Rakesh, over to you, sir.
Professor Arvind Sahai, Professor Prashant Mishra, our keynote speakers for the morning session, Professor Nazibuddin, Dean Academic Affairs, NIT Srinagar, Professor Abdul Liman, Head Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management, NIT Srinagar, Dr. Tahir and his team members, the organizers, and dear participants. A very good morning to all of you. Yes, we are all sitting at our homes and still we are able to interact with each other. This is what is the future. This is what is the future of even the business. When just by sitting at home and just by ordering online and by avoiding the face-to-face contact, we can even get the required things at our doorsteps. This is another business model which this pandemic has taught us.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, we can't see you, sir.
You want to say, okay. I have not switched on my camera because I thought that it will be, maybe it will give some kind of, is it okay now?
No, sir.
So, am I visible now? Because I've already switched on my camera.
Not yet. You please continue, sir. If you switched on the camera, I think you should be visible to us.
Because I've already switched on my camera, but there may be some.
Yes, the issue with the network. Yes, sir. Please
So,
continue.
a very good morning to all of you. I welcome you to this international event, and at the very outset, I would like to congratulate Professor Abdul Liman, Dr. Tahir, and all the team members who have put in a lot of efforts in organizing this international conference. As I see a galaxy of speakers, 17 in number, which is a big achievement. People from institutions like IIM, people from business houses, a big academicians, and it's really a galaxy of all very renowned persons who are going to interact with all participants during the course of this international event. And I'm very delighted to see the efforts which have ultimately, bore this fruit. And I am sure that it's going to be a very big event. It's going to be very useful. Ultimately, the issues raised by my three previous speakers, they all will be discussed and some solutions will be found, and ultimately, what is best for what kind of business models at the small businesses, medium level businesses, and high end businesses are applicable in our country. I think all those issues will be resolved during the course of this conference. As a director of NIT Srinagar, let me tell you something about NIT Srinagar. NIT Srinagar is a very old institution established in 1960 during the second 5-year plan. It was the third REC in the country after REC Warangal, REC Durgapur. Third REC to be established in the country was REC Srinagar, and initially we had a campus within the campus of University of Kashmir, and then later on in the late 70s it was shifted to its new place, that is near Hazratbal Shrine. It's a very beautiful campus situated at the bank of the Dal Lake. It's a small 70-acre campus, and it's a very beautiful campus. We offer 8 undergraduate programs in engineering and 15 postgraduate programs, out of which 11 are in engineering and 4 are in humanities, social science and management. This year we started, in fact, 3 master level programs, one in MSc Chemistry, one in MSc Tide, and the third one is MBA. Our MBA is going to be a bit different, as we have discussed. During our MBA program, the students will be given the real life exposures by a lot of interaction with the business houses, tours within India and abroad, and so that they can have a lot of exposure on different business models and they can be professionally very sound. And in this direction, Dr. Tahir, Professor Abdul Liman, and the entire team is working. And we also offer doctorate and postdoctorate programs in all areas of engineering, applied sciences, and humanities. And presently, we have 463 research scholars registered with us, and out of that, we are around 400 fellowships we are paying. And this is our track record in past 2 years. We have our 50 research scholars have completed their doctorate programs, and 3 postdoctorate programs have also completed their program. With this information, I would like to invite all the worthy speakers and the participants to this campus as and when the situation will improve. And hopefully, our next big event will be in the offline mode, and we will be able to interact with each other face to face. And with these words, I wish this international event a grand success, and I would like to once again congratulate the Applied Science, Humanities, and Business MBA department, and I would like to welcome all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rakesh Sehgal. Now we have with us guests of honor, Professor Prashant Mishra from IIM Calcutta and Professor Arvind Sahai, IIM Ahmedabad. I'd first like to invite Professor Prashant Mishra from IIM Calcutta. Professor Mishra completed his PhD in management from Devi Ahalya University, Indore, and he did his MBA from the same university. Professor Mishra joined IIM Calcutta in 2004. He has been at the helm of postgraduate program office as chairperson for 2 consecutive terms. He recently headed a task force responsible for starting up IIM Bodh Gaya, which was being mentored by IIM Calcutta. Professor Mishra has authored several research papers, case studies, and has published in both national and international journals. He has led, designed, and delivered learning and development initiatives for business leaders, mid-level sales and marketing leaders, unit heads, for more than 50 organizations, both in public and private sectors. He's also conducted programs for senior management professionals with international learning component and has led several senior business executive delegations across the globe for interactions with the corporate headquarters, policy research institutions, local nodal ministries, and international multilateral institutions such as the WTO, UN, EU, and OPEC, etc. Professor Mishra is currently the Dean, New Initiatives and External Relations at IIM Calcutta. It gives me great pleasure to invite Professor Mishra for the keynote address. Professor Mishra, over to you, sir. Sir, am I audible? Are you with us? So you have to unmute your mic.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor. It's my pleasure to be with all of you, and thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk for next 15-20 minutes is about some of the potential trends which are triggered by this event, which is for all of us once in a millennium kind of event. As we all know by now that pandemics of this scale the world has witnessed probably every 100 years. We don't know about future, but this is for sure that the last event which happened in the early 20th century, and there's enough documented evidence or information about how such events shape the course for the humanity in general. And so it is appropriate for all of us to deliberate that what's happening to our world currently and how it is going to shape the way forward, that how people conduct their lives, how businesses conduct their business, how organizations, governments, nations would respond to the emerging trends. And I'm going to organize my thought into 4 buckets. The first trends to look at is what we call the mega trends. And from there flows the trends which affect consumers, markets, and of course technology is at the center of this because that is what has come as one of the biggest facilitator. One of the major trends which we are witnessing currently is the trend of localization. A lot has been talked about the supply chain related issues as far as businesses are concerned. Even before pandemic, the focus was on 2 sets of parallel themes driven by the principle of globalization and liberalization. The first set of actions were being talked about in terms of globalizing supply chain. So the world's second largest economy, China, over the period, last 2 or 3 decades, became the epicenter of global supply chain in terms that it was almost like a manufacturing capital for the world. But the second theme or the second current which emerged and which is largely to do with geopolitics at one stage, that driven by the nationalist sentiments and protectionist sentiments, some of the governments, national governments started talking about giving preferences or protecting the local industries, etc. And so there was a constant sort of tension between the theme of globalization and then there was this sporadic events in different parts of the world were driven by the local geopolitical sentiments. The theme of global or globally integrated supply chain was being challenged. But what this pandemic has done has presented a real scenario where once in last March, most of the countries started shutting down the borders, and especially given the genesis of this virus, which was attributed to China, and effectively, in the first stage, all the travel, supplies, etc. from the China was disrupted, both because of the local shutdown as well as because of various shutdowns or the restraints which were imposed by several governments. What this has triggered is essentially a very intense thought that how do we protect our own processes of supplies, demands, etc. at the local level. I mean, if you take pharmaceutical industry itself, China was responsible for a large percentage of API supplies. An event like this, which essentially also is a healthcare related event, if the API or the pharmaceutical ingredient supply chain is disrupted, nobody can say that, okay, we'll continue our life for a few months or a few days without those supplies and we will survive. There is a real challenge, and that triggered a thought in terms of how local economies or local markets are going to respond. And this is not only related to pharmaceutical, it actually related to almost anything and everything which was where the local markets were well connected or dependent upon the global supplies. We during the last 8-10 months, we heard stories about somebody ordering a laptop of a particular model not being available, or somebody ordering some other stuff which were to come from overseas, or the parts are to come from overseas, and the supplies got delayed or come totally disrupted. Orders has to be cancelled and so on. So one of the trend to witness probably is that how through policies and also investments, the local economies are going to essentially adopt to a multi-tier supply chain kind of systems, which essentially would ensure continuity. So that's a real concern. The localization also is being witnessed vis-a-vis consumption practices itself. Because of the growing uncertainty, the dependence of individuals, consumers itself, on goods of their choice which might be connected with the global supply chain, that itself has come into the question. So when the manufacturing or assembling of the goods and services goes into some sort of a localization mode, the consumption choices also are likely to be moderated. Because the aspiration for a certain category of products over a period of time which has built, or the priorities which has built, will also need to be moderated or changed or tempered with the expectation that availability of those goods are going to be in question, and what is being made available to the consumers will have more and more of local flavor. While the brands may still have to set up their localized or more spread out manufacturing facilities, that might create more customizations, more diversity in terms of designs or choices being presented to the consumers locally. The second mega trend which we are witnessing is the disruptive regulations. And this is essentially being less talked about, in a sense that people sense that many of these may be temporary. But what we are witnessing essentially is that the last 1 year at least, that continuously changing and strict regulations due to this pandemic induced crisis has made us think that both at individual level or at business level or organizations level, are the regulations going to be more intrusive? For example, a lot of places, as of now, still governments notify that mask wearing is necessary, right? Or the vaccination program which is being launched So a certain type of consumption also being drawn through regulations, or the interstate movement regulations also at one stage was restrained. The change in travel parameters or the requirements on establishments that how they have to conduct themselves. It could also probably remains to be seen that whether there are more such regulations or regulatory interventions in store, which would not only affect that how we as an individual conduct our life or the choices we make, but also to the businesses, societies, or the geographies itself. International air travel is another example where you have seen that there are certain type of restrictions or conditions being brought upon. The third trend, and which is more relevant to the individuals, is that the presence-free living, as we call it, or the touch-free transactions. What all of us, or almost the whole humanity, has witnessed in last 10 months or so, has not only brought new discomfort, but also new realizations. Right? Be it in terms of how we communicate, how we transact our finances, how we transact for our purchases, how we entertain ourselves, how we bind or bind together as community, as family. Tremendous amount of, for the present times, one can say, is an external induced change in behavior which has been witnessed. However, it is anticipated that a lot of these experiences are going to remain permanent, both in shorter and the longer term. If you look at what happened with the edtech and the fintech industry, and even health tech industry, if you just look at these three consumption sides, how is education conducted? How is financial transactions today conducted? And how the healthcare related needs, at least certain type of needs, let's say clinical consultation, right? How is it being conducted? We at our campus itself have almost 800 student population on campus, and we realize that for the safety, the free movement in and out of the campus is not possible. But what happens in case somebody falls sick? And we have a very limited, medical resource. So there are a lot of these teleprograms which you have to list with. So whether it is COVID-related problems or whether it is non-COVID-related problems, the emphasis more on the distance-based linkages. And I'm not going to delve on the consumption-related habits, but the numbers say it all. If you look at when demonetization happened, at that point in time, a lot of people talked about, and a lot of cynics talked about that, how would a poor vegetable vendor will have digital transaction and they deal only in cash and this and that. What you would realize that, and again, see from personal experience, I'm actually, for the campus in the early days of lockdown, we arranged that there is a vendor who will take supplies over WhatsApp, orders, bring the goods to a certain location in the campus, and in a staggered way, everybody will walk to that place to receive orders. Even that vendor is not willing at that point in time, was not willing to deal in cash, and rather would say, here is my Paytm or here is my bank account, you probably link and transfer money directly there. Right? And I'm sure that many communities, wherever community living was happening and where community was coming forward to provide some of these basic services, many of these induced a certain kind of changes. And as we all know, habit change and habit formation follows a certain process. And the fact that this pandemic remained on a sustained long-term basis, and in the context of financial transaction industry itself, what we would see essentially is that the numbers are going to be more stable and sustainable than short-term disruptive events like demonetization. So the three mega trends relates to the living experience, the localization move, and also the way regulation is going to be more inclusive. If we talk about some of the consumer trends, one of the most salient consumer trends which is being witnessed and which is again related to these three mega trends is that today, for most of us, or almost all of us, safety trumps privacy. Okay? Earlier, only in case of regulated businesses or regulated consumption products, right? The privacy debate was not brought in. But today, safety is paramount and it trumps privacy. Now that creates some sort of a data deluge, right? So one is the psychological change, but on the other hand, it also presents a huge opportunity to individuals. Because all of us today have a very strong urge to make sure that we remain safe, and if any data is sought for our safety, people are more willingly sharing it. And Arogya Setu is a great example. People who want to travel, if the conditions are put, they are providing all kinds of information because they want to travel and they want to travel safe, and they also want to keep others safe. Right? If you look at some of these other businesses where sharing of data helps safety, right? So whether it is public health, whether it is social interaction related data, whether it is visiting outdoors, right? Many of these technologies existed earlier also, but it was adoption rate was very, very low, which is not the case today, right? Or the technologies which were available and their speed of spread was not so high. Those kind of technological interventions, which essentially through sharing of information was ensuring only convenience probably earlier. But today the convenience is combined by the safety, and safety probably is becoming paramount. Now this change in perspective could probably also trigger a mindset change not only beneficial for health purposes, but also shaping what we call a new data for benefit kind of mentality. Of course, one of the key consumption trend, and which my personal view is might be in case of large number of consumers might be more short to intermediate term, is the value for money mentality, right? I mean, people started believing that the fragility of life or the fragility of existing materialistic systems with one set of invisible enemy or invisible intruder, and people learned the value of frugality, value for money mentality, right? third consumer trend which was witnessed is the community power. And there was already a research theme which was existing on shared consumption. However, that was, to my understanding, was not mainstreamed to an extent, but what you are now going to witness probably, or all of us are likely to witness now probably, where the shared economy as well as the shared concerns both are going to shape a lot of developments going in future, right? And of course, a lot of consequences for industries which are riding on tech. So there is this great indoors kind of. So one of the trends which probably people are going to witness is related to how the homes or our own houses are going to be reconfigured, right? Many of us realize that the way our homes are configured today are not fit for work, living, socializing, and other interactions as such, right? Is our home good enough? We have received from our own students while they were away in the early days of pandemic, some very moving notes about that how in a small Bombay suburb home, 3 siblings who have to attend their colleges, they don't have enough space so that they can, in the privacy or in the peace of time, they can probably conduct their businesses, and that's why they need to come back to their hostel room or whatever. I myself witnessed that neither our home was equipped for 2 kids who were school going, right? So spaces has to be redesigned, and that leads to consumption of certain objects that lead to houses of certain types. So this is just one thing which likely to, especially if you have working couples as well as kids, school going, old parents. So not only it impacted, what kind of infrastructure at home you have, but it also impacts how you design home, right? And this is just one example I'm talking about. The whole financial consumption model for individuals are going to change. Many healthy folks never thought that one contingency at a middle age could be that these kind of elevated healthcare potential expenses, right? People used to think that cancer, some sudden heart disease and those kind of things only could be financially challenging. Who thought that a turbocharged flu can also be a financial burden, right? And then, of course, other consumer trend is the digital social interaction, how you engage consumers, how consumers want to be engaged, how they want to talk, how they want to complain, how they want to get their services done, etc. From the organization point of view, of course, 3 trends which one can talk about is that only being a tech-intensive organization is not enough. People learned the meaning of agility at a whole new level in the last 10 months, right? Even best of technology institutions, which were kind of like a tortoise, slow moving in terms of technology adoption or motivating their customers to use technology. I can go on and on talking about education institutions in India and the kind of trouble they went through in early stages. Even the best of the best, how many of them were really equipped to actually seamlessly at a speed move, right? I mean, I know many of the institutions of our type has to delay sessions just to figure out that what's the best way to move forward, right? And so people learned that agility pre-pandemic, what was the meaning of agility, and what is the meaning of agility post-pandemic, and that is one challenge businesses are facing big time, right? Because this is the opportunity where you learn that in case any such disruptive event happens, not only healthcare driven, but even geopolitics driven, how do you leverage technology to remain in motion? And that's going to be one trend on the market side. Many of these, I mean, we were listening digitization, digitalization, digital strategy even before March 2020. Okay? Today nobody is talking about digital, that, we have a very unique strategy of digitization. Nobody is talking about that. That's like a necessity in last 10 months, everybody realized. But now what's going to happen is that how do you leverage that technology to be agile to an extent that you can seamlessly, quickly transform so that you remain in motion. What also corporations learned that when they operate in this society, and that is one trend which is going to be, I saw some notes which argue that India in terms, whether by serendipity or whatever, when the government brought in this compulsory CSR spend rule for the Indian corporates, much before the pandemic, long before the pandemic, what has happened today is that the whole stakeholder theory or stakeholder perspective for the business also are going to include the generosity or the corporate social responsibility is likely to take a whole new meaning today. And one of the things which you are seeing is in terms of this whole vaccine, experiments and vaccine development and distribution itself. And of course, the other trend which you're looking at is the virtual economy and e-commerce push. And on the technology trends, there are three trends which I would indicate towards. One is the whole streaming business, the internet, data, telecom, and streaming based. What we are doing with this conference today. That's going to be one trend in various spheres of businesses, our life itself. The fintech and edtech industry is going to undergo a tremendous amount of change, and thus changing the way financial services and education and health operated. So the contactlessness, what we call, is going to be another technology trend. Right? So we used to hear as an example all these drone-based delivery and all that, or robotics. More and more of those are going to come in play, at least in areas where contacts can be avoided. And of course, fast-scaling commercial platforms are also one of the trends, which essentially it's no more this that you go through a normal diffusion cycle. You are really looking at a new meaning of agility, new meaning of disruption, but also the speed at which you scale up. Right? So these are a few thoughts which I wanted to share. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Maybe after Arvind has spoken, if there are any questions, both of us can take together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mishra, for the invaluable insights. Professor Mishra gave us an insight of how the world, the businesses, the technological fronts have changed, how organizations before and now after COVID have to learn the meanings of the same things that existed, but in a different way. Professor Mishra talked about how the contactlessness and other issues are here, and some of them are here to stay. He talked about various trends, be it on the consumer front, on the technological front, on the organizational front, and how we deal with them and how all of us have dealt with them. I now would like to invite Professor Arvind Sahai from IIM Ahmedabad. Professor Sahai has completed his PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. He has a vast experience in teaching as well as an industry experience as a manager, consultant, and corporate trainer. Professor Sahai has led leadership positions in academia as Dean, Alumni and External Relations, as Chairperson, PGPX, Chairperson, Executive Education, Chairperson, Marketing Area. He was also appointed as a Chairman, India Gold Policy Center at IIM Ahmedabad from March 2016 onwards, and the Chair, Asia Pacific of Partnership in International Management as a consortium of 63 top global business schools in October 2016. In December 2016, he was appointed as the Professor M.N. Vora Chair of Marketing. Professor Sahai has also been appointed previously as the Chair of the NSC Center for Behavioral Sciences in 2019. Professor Sahai is the recipient of University-wide Best Dissertation Award at the University of Texas at Austin. He's the winner of Innovation in Teaching Award at London Business School, the Devang Mehta Best Teacher in Marketing Management, and the UTV Bloomberg Award for the Best Marketing Professor. He has consulted for and delivered customized executive education for more than 35 firms across Asia, Europe, and Africa. His most recent research projects are in the areas of pricing, neurosciences, brand management, gold, and innovations. Professor Sahai is currently working as a professor in IIM Ahmedabad and is also holding the position of an independent director at HIL Limited. I would now like to invite Professor Sahai for the keynote address. Professor Sahai, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sadaf Firdaus. I hope I got your name right.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And thank you for the opportunity. I have a presentation that I want to share, so I'm going to just see if I can bring this on, and you have to tell me whether you can see the presentation.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. I can see your screen. I hope all of us are able to see the screen.
Can one or two other people also confirm that they can see my screen?
Yes, sir. It's
Yes, sir.
visible.
Okay. Okay, great. So, I don't know whether Dr. Sehgal is still there, Director of NIT Srinagar. My respectful greetings to him. Dr. Najib, Dr. Leman, Dr. Sadaf Firdaus, and Dr. Arif, I think you also talked to me. My greetings to all of you. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal.
Thank you, sir.
Jai Hind. Thank you for also the very generous introduction. I'm going to be talking about blockchain and artificial intelligence and the impact on marketing. I'm a marketing professor, and over the last 2.5 years, one has been looking at technology and fintech in particular. And in fintech, there are two technologies, blockchain and artificial intelligence, which have a fairly major role to play. And so therefore, blockchain and AI. I'm also very mindful that the hosts, Dr. Najib, Dr. Laman, Dr. Sehgal, everyone has been talking about technology and its impact. So I guess this is kind of consistent with what the organizers are looking for. Dr. Sadaf, how much time would I have for the presentation?
Sir, it's up to you. You can take your time, please.
So I will aim for about 40 minutes, and
Sure, sir.
I hope you can bear with those for the time. I don't normally like
monologues, but I think
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to hear you, sir.
we will go with the presentation for about 40 minutes. If
Sure,
someone wants to ask a question in between, I'm happy to take questions, not a problem.
sure, sir. Please go ahead.
So, what we want to talk about is essentially two things: blockchain and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and marketing. My aim essentially is to take you through some of the basic ideas of blockchain and how it is impacting marketing, and the same for artificial intelligence and how it is impacting marketing. And then I will try and connect it to some of the themes of today, because we're talking about contemporary business trends. Of course, we'll talk about marketing. Uh, a few people also mentioned small businesses in the context of the valley. So towards the end, I will also try to integrate that into my conversation. So why do we want to look at blockchain? Essentially, we want to look at blockchain as a technology of the future. It's a little bit like TCP/IP protocol that enables the internet. So blockchain is kind of a similar technology in a different way and a different level. And there are two things that it really enables. One is what we call as verification of state, and the other is the cost of networking. So what is verification of state? When I have a transaction, when I, let's say, Dr. Arif has a car that I want to buy, and I buy the car from Dr. Arif, that is a transaction, and a transaction is going to be recorded. Now, there is the issue of trust between the two parties. Do I trust Dr. Arif to tell me enough about the car for me to make an informed decision? Does Dr. Arif trust me to make the payment on time because it is between two known people without any intermediaries? So when we do transactions, then the two parties to a transaction have to verify their state, and they have to verify that everything is in order. So there are intermediaries out there. There are brokers, there are middlemen, there are legal institutions. There are legal institutions that allow this to happen, and that has a cost. Yes, there is a cost to all of those setting up of, and the functioning of all those institutions. Blockchain essentially reduces the cost of verification of state by enabling everything to happen on a platform, on a technology platform. And similarly, it reduces the cost of networking, how people can verify. If Dr. Sadaf Firdaus wants to verify that indeed a sale of a car transaction took place between Professor Arvind Saha and Dr. Arif, she can do so directly without having to refer to anybody, because that information, that technology exists on the blockchain. The blockchain information is irrepudiable. It is transaction. The cost of transaction is less. It is immutable once it is there. So therefore, that is the reason for looking at blockchain. It kind of increases the efficiency of transaction, and it decreases the cost of networking. And why it is so? Because as we can see, there's a lot of stuff that's happening on blockchain. Estimates are that 10% of the transactions of the world will take place on blockchain by 2025. Now, most of these estimates tend to be overestimates, but even if it is 5%, half of this, that's a fairly large sum of economic transactions that is happening. And applications extend into many different areas, some of which we have talked about. And I can give you an example on which we wrote a case last year, that HSBC as a company has created a blockchain-based platform called Contour that enables international trade transactions to happen. Normally, a trade transaction which would take 45 days to 60 days, out of which the transportation would be only around 10-15 days. The rest of it would simply be documentation, verification, and all of those things. So the documentation and verification part kind of comes down to a very, very few hours almost, because the blockchain is set up and all the parties are on the blockchain, and therefore it is much more efficient. HSBC, once the blockchain is up and running, HSBC spends less money, the clients spend less money, the trade transaction happens a lot more quickly. So those are the reasons for why blockchain is likely to grow. It will grow. How quickly is anyone's guess?
TCP/IP was first invented in 1969, the DARPANET in the United States, and then it grew, and it was finally 30 years later, in the mid 90s, late 90s, that the internet really took off. And today, we can't think of a world without the internet. Blockchain was invented around 20 years ago. So our best educated estimate is now it is reaching a stage where it will start getting more and more into mainstream. And HSBC Contour is one such example of an implementation of blockchain. So what is blockchain? Right? I will share a copy of this with you guys if you want later. Let me go to what is blockchain. It's essentially a distributed database of records. You can think of it as a set of computers that exist where all the transactions have been executed. And everybody has access, or people who are on the blockchain have access to the transactions. They can verify a transaction independent of who did the transaction. And the transaction is irrepudiable and immutable. Nobody can change it. It's kind of built. The technology is built and it cannot be erased. And so therefore you can verify records of transactions. Now this is pretty nifty if you think about land records, or if you think about trade transactions, or if you think about loyalty points in consumer goods and so on. And to use a basic analogy, it is easy to steal a cookie from a jar than stealing the cookie from a cookie jar kept in a marketplace being observed by thousands of people. So essentially all transactions are open transactions. You cannot do a hidden transaction. And there are three parts of the block essentially. One is the transaction details. I bought a car from Dr. Arif at this date on this time. This was the amount of, this was the rupee, Indian rupees that was exchanged. We are the two participants in the transaction. And there is a code that is given which distinguishes the block from every other block, right? And that essentially are the three parts of the block. You'll have to excuse me for just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll just include it, excuse me for just half a minute.
Sure, sir. No problem at all. Professor Sahai has asked for half a minute. He will be joining us very soon, ladies and gentlemen. Please bear with us.
So, can you see me and hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you as well as see you.
Okay, so those are the three parts of a block essentially. And if we all have a sense of, what is a blockchain and what is a block, we now have a sense of what is achievable on the block, right? It's almost like kind of a distributed ledger technology, right? You can also make an analogy with the financial statement of a company, right? You have an asset and a liability in the financial statements of a company, and that asset and liability, the balance sheet and the PLN, is independently verified by an auditor, a third-party auditor. But with a blockchain, this particular set of transactions, which is the balance sheet and the profit and loss, it exists in multiple places. And because it exists in multiple places, you don't need a third-party auditor. It could be public or it could be private. And why you don't need a third-party auditor is because each node in the network, each block carries the information, a copy of that ledger. So it's a little bit energy intensive, right? Just like Bitcoin, for example, which is one implementation of blockchain, is supposed to use more than 7,000 megawatts of power. That's almost as much as Switzerland as a country uses. And because it is distributed, there is no single point of failure, right? If the third-party auditor fails, you get instances like Mr. Ramalinga Raju of the company Satyam Computers. There was a single point failure. The books were cooked. There was no cash, and the books were showing that there was cash. But because it is distributed, it is difficult to do that. And once stored, it cannot be altered, and each record in the database is known as a block, just like we talked about over here. And the block consists of a group of transactions that is added to the end of the blockchain. So how does it work? Somebody requests a transaction. somebody requests a transaction, and once they request a transaction, excuse me again.
Sure, sir.
So someone requests a transaction. To go back to the example that we were talking about, I'm buying a car from Dr. Arif. We get together using car24 or cardeco.com, and the request is transacted to a P2P network consisting of computers. So it's no longer only Cardeco or Cars24 that is there, and that network kind of validates that this is the person, these are the two persons. When the transaction takes place and the payments are made, let's say we make a payment through WhatsApp, or we make a payment through PhonePe or through Paytm, that transaction is recorded on this network, which is sitting alongside the blockchain network, which is sitting alongside this network on which I am doing the transaction, the Cardeco network, and so on. And as soon as the transaction is done, all the relevant details of the transaction are uploaded into this network, and they are replicated in all of these blocks which exist on the blockchain. So essentially, this is the fundamental nature of a blockchain and how it works. You can have many different types of blockchains. A blockchain can be public, which is permissionless. So Bitcoin, I don't know if any of you guys are actually buying and selling Bitcoins. It is now legal, though for a few months, I think a couple of years, the RBI had made it illegal. But now it is legal. You can buy and sell blockchain, and some people have made lots of money in the last 12 months buying and selling blockchain. So, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is one implementation of blockchain. And this is a public blockchain. Anybody, myself, Prashant, Dr. Arif, Dr. Sadaf, Dr. Liman, Dr. Najib, Dr. Segal, anybody with a little bit of programming skills, now that is a requirement, can be a part of the blockchain. You can actually go onto that blockchain, and if you do the necessary programming, you can create a Bitcoin. Right? So, therefore, this is a public blockchain. Anybody with the necessary skills can be part of the blockchain. The HSBC Contour platform that I talked about, that is not a public blockchain. That is a private or a permission blockchain. Only certain entities, HSBC, the other bank on the other side, HSBC is the exporters bank, maybe ING Bearing is the importers bank, then the exporter and the importer, the logistics company, the shipping companies, the customs port, these are the people who are permitted to be on the blockchain. And these are the kind of blockchains which have a commercial implementation in place, which have a commercial use, and which are becoming increasingly popular. In the B2B space, definitely, but as we shall see, even in the B2C space, they are becoming more popular. And the HSBC one goes one step beyond. It is actually, you can call it a consortium. It is a consortium blockchain rather than just a private blockchain. A private blockchain will have only one or two or three parties that controls everything. Here it is HSBC, it is ING Bearings, it is a couple of companies that are doing the exports and imports, it is IBM, which is putting up the underlying technology, and so on. So these are the three kinds of blockchain: public, private, consortium. For business purposes, it is the private and the consortium blockchains essentially which are relevant. And the benefits are there, as we've already kind of discussed, I've talked about. There's increased transparency, you can track accurately, there's a permanent ledger of record, particularly for land records, for example. I cannot imagine a better system than a blockchain. There's a reduction in the cost of doing things. Of course, there are some unknowns, even for HSBC platform that we know. We know that now there are competing blockchain platforms. Contour is one platform of which HSBC is a member. There's Marco Polo, there is WeTrade. So if you're an importer and an exporter, which blockchain platform do you choose to do your import and export transactions? You can think of it, a long time ago in the 90s in the US, there were three competing mobile network platforms. There was TDMA, there was CDMA, there was a third one, and
you could not make calls between the networks. So that is not a good situation to have. Hopefully, this will get resolved over here. What are the applications? You can do it in automotive, financial services. Financial services is the one that I'm most familiar with. You can also do it for voting. You can do blockchain-based voting. Then you won't have, or at least you will have less of all the nonsense that we have seen with Mr. Donald Trump and his shenanigans in the United States just now. Healthcare, patient information tends to be sensitive, to be private. You can encrypt it, and only certain people can be given access. So while the information is there on the blockchain in an encrypted form, not everyone has access to it. In a public blockchain, anybody can access the Bitcoin blockchain. But in a private blockchain, only some people will have access to certain information at a given level of permission. So the Contour platform of HSBC, not everybody will have access to the details, what is the value of the transaction, but they will have access to the documentation relating to the transaction, that a bill of lading has happened and the goods have been loaded on a ship at Nhava Sheva port on this date at this time. So what are some features of the blockchain? How can we summarize the blockchain? Once in place, it cannot be corrupted. It is decentralized. By the way, the first point is a very important place. Once in place. Putting up a blockchain is not easy. However, once it is there in place, it cannot be corrupted. Decentralized technology, enhanced security, distributed ledgers. It is built through consensus, so people have to agree. Some parties have to agree to create that blockchain. One single person or one single entity cannot create a blockchain. And of course, once it is in place, your transactions can take place that much more quickly. I'm going to skip this part and run to a little bit of implications. So what is the impact on customer experiences? It can do so much. It can automate contract fulfillment. You don't need to have to follow up on what is happening. A lot of the follow-up can happen by itself. It can consolidate identity management. So conceivably, the identity of people who are doing the transactions is also part of the blockchain. It can simplify logistics, supply chain, especially if I'm Maruti Suzuki and I want to understand what is happening upstream in my specialty steel supplier. Because as Maruti Suzuki, I don't buy specialty steel. Specialty steel comes to my tier 1 supplier who is supplying, let us say, crankshafts to me. And I want to understand what is happening to the specialty steel quality which is being manufactured by my tier 2 supplier in Ludhiana. Then if they are on blockchain, then I can simplify it, I can know what is happening. And of course, because of that increased transparency as Maruti Suzuki, I have greater peace of mind. I can verify it a lot more easily. And increasingly, especially in the West, but I don't see why not in India also, and including, as you said, in the Valley, if you can have end-to-end visibility of the data concerning the transaction, then blockchain becomes really, really useful. So what are the benefits? If we were to summarize the benefits, where there is no trust, blockchain can lead to improved trust. We talked about HSBC. You can have much better, more efficient, faster trade transactions. You can track stuff. If I am a buyer, if I'm a buyer sitting in Bombay and I want to buy organic millets with a proper blockchain technology, I can actually track where my millet is coming from, and I will say I will buy only this kind of millet with the attendant increased accuracy. And this, of course, leads to an increased ability to know your customer. You can prevent fraud, decrease fraud quite substantially. The key, of course, is once a blockchain is in place, it's not very easy. Diminished claims and, of course, greater control. So what are some areas? So we think that there are these 4 areas where blockchain will happen. It will happen in firm-to-customer transactions. It will happen in firm-to-firm transactions. It will happen in customer-to-customer transactions and firm-to-firm transactions. The HSBC one that I showed you is a firm-to-firm transaction. There are some other examples of these. So, for example, in consumer-to-firm transactions, you have the Brave blockchain or the Loyal blockchain. The Loyal blockchain allows you to create loyalty points and to consolidate loyalty points across different kinds of industries. So if as a customer I've got loyalty points in travel, and I've got loyalty points in banking, and I've got loyalty points from some retail chain like Best Buy or Shoppers Stop or Reliance Mart, then I can actually
mix and match those loyalty points. Otherwise, I can only use loyalty points with one person. My travel loyalty points I can only use for travel. But with a loyal blockchain, I can actually use loyalty points across. That's those loyalty points that I have across industries. I can consolidate and then I can use it. Of course, this will then require that those other guys in different industries, the let's say Indigo as an airline and Make My Trip as a company, and Shopper Stop as a retail chain, and Reliance Smart or a DMart as a retail chain, they're all part of the blockchain. And this is a little more detailed idea of a blockchain. This comes out of a paper that we have just submitted, just a few days ago. So let me pause there. This can also happen in music. You can completely disintermediate the entire thing. Let me pause there and say that if are there any questions, any comments?
So I asked the participants to post questions meanwhile. I'll be facilitating the question answer session immediately after your lecture.
You want me to give a lecture? Okay.
Not a lecture, sir, after the keynote.
Okay, so here we go again. So these are other possible use cases. Property and land records has already begun. The Telangana government is doing something in it. The Georgia government has already done something on it. The Bolivia government has done something on it. The RTO office operations, regional transport office operations are doing something on it. Passport office, supply chain has begun. The example that I quoted to you comes from that particular thing. Patient management for chronic cases. Tech Mahindra is doing some work over there. Gold traceability and transaction management systems for a spot exchange. So at India Gold Policy Center at IIM Ahmedabad, we are working with a company called Chainflux to enable a blockchain that will make traceability of gold a lot better, because as we go forward, India is part of this FATF, right, Financial Action Task Force, which requires that we avoid any financial transactions which can be related to terrorism or child labor and those kind of things. And in gold, there is that possibility. So a blockchain which will be implemented will make it easier for this to happen. So the second thing that I thought I would spend a little bit of time on is on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and what is the link to marketing. So the first part of my talk today draws from my own work. The second part draws from the work of one of my colleagues.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Haji, boliye.
Sir, do you feel that blockchain technology will be used in India for elections, for having a safe elections in future? Do you see any possibility for that?
Not in the near future. Blockchain technology, in terms of the product life cycle, I'm sure all of us sitting here have some idea of what is a product life cycle, or a technology life cycle. So the technology, it's in the very initial stages of the life cycle, and the implementation is not going to be easy. It's a political step more than a technology step, and the political step may not be easy. If it is, I think it will be good, provided it is implemented by a reputed organization that people have trust in. So it's all about trust, right? And unfortunately, we live in a country where trust is in short supply.
Thank you, sir.
So moving on to AI and what is happening in AI, what is artificial intelligence? So what are some uses of AI? I think AI is a little more better known than blockchain. So I'm not going to belabor the point over here. AI is always based on data, right? And it is based on data that companies collect from us. So as you can see, what is the kind of data collected by different companies? So those of you who are on WhatsApp, I strongly encourage you to kind of move to one of the other platforms, because WhatsApp is now going to collect all the data that Facebook collects, and Facebook therefore is the repository of, as you can see, it knows more about you than probably your wife or husband or son or daughter or your family member will know with all of that data. So AI ML based on data, what is it exactly? So, let me share with you an example. Let's say I want to teach an AI to drive a car. right? So how do you teach an artificial intelligence to drive a car? You show the AI videos, right? You show the AI videos of different cars being driven in different places. So let's say I show the AI videos of cars and trucks and cycles and dumper trucks and tricycles being driven in New York and Michigan and Texas, in California, in Los Angeles, in Chicago. And based on, and what is it? I show them videos. So in the videos, what does the AI learn? The AI is programmed to see that the car is, or the vehicle is going from point A to point B, and when in going from point A to point B, the vehicle stops when there is a red light. So all of these pixels on the computer, they are data points. So what the AI learns is red light means you stop. What the computer learns is that when there is a zebra crossing and there are people crossing, then you slow down and wait for them to cross. What the computer learns is, because all of that is there in the videos, right? Whatever is there in the videos is what the computer learns, what the AI learns. And once it has learned that well enough, you have shown it enough data points essentially, then that AI will be able to drive a car. All that you need to do is to connect the AI to the steering wheel and to the accelerator and the clutch and the brake, and it will be able to drive the car. Now, what are some good and things, and what are the limitations? Remember, I said that the data is about video of vehicles being driven in different places in America, right? So if that AI is now fitted onto a car in India and it's asked to drive in Ahmedabad, the place that I live in, and I'm sure that in Srinagar, the place where most of you guys are, that AI will cause an accident very quickly because it simply does not have the data to deal with how drivers in Ahmedabad drive. Okay, so AI is both a very, very powerful thing. At the same time, it has very strong limitations. It's a function of the data that is fed on the basis of which it learns to do its actions. But it is getting more and more powerful as more data becomes available. Yes, as more data becomes available, AI can take more and more. AI can be able to deal with more and more situations. And you can apply this to many other contexts. Suppose I am Reliance Smart or DMart. I have collected data on my customers who have bought stuff from me over the last 3 years. All the transaction data, if I'm then able to put together with some demographic data, I can then detect patterns in that behavior, right? Essentially, AI detects patterns. Another example of AI is when Google took data from Aravind Eye Care Hospital in Madurai, right? Aravind Eye Care Hospital in Madurai is one of the largest centers for cataract surgery in the world. People come there from Europe, from America, from Japan to train. Doctors come there to train because nowhere else in the world do you have that many cataract surgeries taking place. To train a doctor, you need to be able to see, observe, and do those number of surgeries. Only then you become a good doctor. So therefore, Madurai Eye Care Hospital has tons of data on people who have gone through cataract, on parameters relating to the condition of their eye. But cataract surgery is a surgery. Whenever a surgery happens, you collect other body data also. You collect data about the heart, about the lungs, blood pressure, sugar, blah blah blah, and so on. So what Google did was they were given some data by Madurai Aravind Eye Care Hospital, and based on that data, they simply asked the AI to see whether there were any correlations. And what the AI determined was that based on certain parameters to do with cataract, it could predict heart attacks of people 3 years down in the future, right? So in another way of thinking about AI is that it is one of the most powerful ways to detect correlations and associations in the data that you have. Of course, then you have to decide what you're going to do with that AI. And what is the difference between AI and machine learning? Machine learning is one level above AI. It allows the artificial intelligence to learn by itself. It allows the artificial intelligence to become more intelligent over time. And this is a little bit about the history. And let us see how it goes. It was there updated till 2017. What is the difference between traditional programming and machine learning? Here, the machine learning can create its own program. It's powerful enough to create its own program, and it can learn by itself. So, for example, a machine has learned how to play the board game of Go. It's a Chinese-Japanese board game.
about strategy, and now it has beaten the world grandmaster, the world champion. It was not predicted to have done that before 2025, but it already did it in 2017. So it is becoming more powerful. And revenues are growing. So the areas where AI is improving marketing include financial services, consumer product goods, organized retail, automotive. Now, I am part of a venture just now, which is going to be manufacturing electric vehicles, right? So IIM Ahmedabad has this nice feature that allows faculty to get what we call as sweat equity in startups. Of course, I have to share some of my sweat equity with the institution. But that's the price you pay for being a part of a nice institution like IIM Ahmedabad. So this particular organization that I'm a part of is creating electric motorcycles, which will have AI-based diagnostics of the battery and the transmission. Yes, the battery and the transmission are the heart of an electric vehicle. So this will know that to tell the guy, because it also has a 4G connectivity on the motorcycle, it will tell the guy and it will keep reminding him that you are at this level, you should go to a charging station now, or your bike is ready for maintenance. Nobody has to give you a phone call. Nobody has to tell you follow up or chase you. Your bike will be telling you that. So different ways of kind of extending the reach of AI. And what is the future? I think AI, for so far as customer experience is concerned, it will become much, much more customer friendly. Right now, if you're dealing with a chatbot on a phone call, I don't think it's very customer friendly. But as it becomes better, as you feed more data, as more instances, possible situations are fed into the AI, it will become more powerful, and it will be able to increase the level of the customer experience that we get when we have service failures or when we are dealing with companies. And these are some estimates on how will profitability change by industry over a period of time. I want to end by just showing you this, that what we see essentially, a lot of it is what we call as pre-purchase. So the web and mobile promotions, campaigns and so on, these are all the tip of the iceberg. AI, ML essentially allow you with the appropriate data to look at all the post-purchase part and then put together a customer experience which will be a lot better. Again, these are some this is a comparison between WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram and so on. So I'm going to leave you with that and stop my talk over here, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. And I'm hoping that there are lots of questions.
Thank you very much, sir, for a very insightful address. I'd like to take some questions if we have. So there's a question by Dr. Fozia. She asks, how far cryptocurrency is going to replace the paper currency, and what are its future implications?
So, cryptocurrency is not going to replace paper currency anytime soon. The shift will happen gradually. It will happen, but it will happen quite gradually. How gradually? If I were to give you an educated guess, we are looking at maybe 10 to 25 years. But in some senses, cryptocurrency is already real, and it is already kind of in use, right? As an investment alternative, cryptocurrency is already a part of asset allocation of many different people. As a currency that can be used to buy and sell stuff, right? That is the ultimate hallmark of a currency, where something can be used to buy and sell stuff. Right now, Bitcoin is an asset. But as a currency that can be used to buy and sell stuff, that is still some time away. How much time? It depends. There are a few merchants that have started accepting Bitcoins, but it is a network issue, right? The number of people who have Bitcoins has to be large enough. The number of merchants who accept Bitcoins has to be large enough. So it's a chicken and egg. Now, somebody has to set that network in motion, that virtuous cycle in motion, and that can happen either through government intervention or central bank intervention, or through the intervention of a very large corporate. Yes, Facebook tried to do its own version of Bitcoin, right? What was it called?
Anybody? The Facebook equivalent of Bitcoin was called Liger, right? If I remember correctly. Yes, I can't remember it properly. That's why I'm asking you guys. So therefore, Facebook has not succeeded. Why didn't it succeed? Because there are not enough people who will accept any private currency, and governments don't want it. There's a good chance that Facebook might be broken up, that WhatsApp might be separated from Facebook. If it happens, I think it will be good for all of us.
From marketing perspective, how do you see the step of WhatsApp that they have recently taken or changed their privacy statements? How do you see from marketing perspective?
So let me put on two hats over here. The first hat I will put on is of Facebook, and the second hat is of you and I as business users of WhatsApp. And I'll put on a third hat also, which is that of you and I as individual users of WhatsApp. So if I'm Facebook and I've got 2 billion people on this planet using WhatsApp, I want to monetize it. I'm a company. I'm not in the business of charity. I want to monetize it. How do I monetize it? By collecting the information about your use patterns and then sharing that data with others and charging them for it, or by providing you some services, right? So I will want to monetize it. Now, if I'm a business user of WhatsApp, and some people here might be business users of WhatsApp or may know someone who is a business user of WhatsApp. If I'm a business user of WhatsApp, then WhatsApp is a very powerful tool for me to deal with my customers, to engage in customer experience. It's also a powerful tool that I use to be able to make payments now. WhatsApp payments is also available. So therefore, like any other service, these are chargeable services, right? You'll have to just excuse me for a minute.
Sure, sir. Sure. We're currently in the question answer session with Professor Arvind Sahai. He should be back in a moment. Please bear with us. Meanwhile, you can post any more questions if you have. We also have with us Professor Mishra. So meanwhile, if you have any questions related to his address, you can please post. Yes, sir. Professor Mishra, are you with us, sir?
So what is to be done? The patient is all the treatments now.
Okay, we have.
No need of staying.
Do we have Professor Prashant?
Yeah, I'm back. You can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, we have Professor Sahai with us again. So there is a question. So there's a question by Irfan Rashid. So are you with us? Should I go on with the question?
Go ahead.
Yes. So Irfan asks, why is it tough to understand blockchain technology? I mean, there is no clear definition of this technology for a layman. Secondly, no one controls it and every member has equal access. How is it trustworthy then?
So the public blockchain is controlled by no one and everyone has access, but that is only notionally, right? My chai wala from whom I buy the chai downstairs, he cannot access the blockchain, which is Bitcoin. Why? Because he does not have the skill set. To be able to access a public blockchain like Bitcoin, one should have access, right?
Right, sir. So another question has been asked by Dr. Shahid.
Sorry, I'm not yet done. The other part of the response is that private blockchains can be accessed by anyone. Yes. So you can actually do it.
Simple thing, just take out.
Next question, please.
So Dr. Shahid asks how blockchain technology is helpful for investment decisions by the investor.
Can you repeat that again?
So he asks how blockchain technology is helpful for investment decision by the investors. How does blockchain technology help the
So
investors?
blockchain is not really about investment decisions. It is about doing transactions. It is about transactions, and it is not about investments. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's one more question, which is from us. In a country like India, where the bottom of pyramid is almost 70%, so how do you see it going in a country like ours? What is its future in our country? And how can academicians like us contribute?
So here it will be a mix. In the top 30% there will be commercial users. For the bottom 30% there will be public governance users, so land records, health records, healthcare services, and so on. So that will be the way in which it will be implemented here.
Do we have any more questions for Professor Sahai?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, like you said, that blockchain, we can have health records, revenue records, and all those things. Throughout the world, and in academics, we receive different organizations throughout the world for the verification of these certificates. So what I'm saying is, has anybody or any organization done some work for creating a kind of an pan-world blockchain so that we can have the repository of all these certificates or academicians so that they can very easily verify their credentials? I don't know whether such a thing exists, because it will be a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
That is utopia and will happen probably in another 100 years, if at all. I think we should be a little more realistic and take these small implementations like HSBC Contour or the Telangana government or Loyal or Braves or Smokestack. So these are small implementations. Over a period of time, it will build up. I think even in the academic space, it will build up. And it is up to us to try and make the best of it. But as a technology, it is here to stay and it will continue.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I think we're done with the question answer session. Thank you very much once again, Professor Sahai.
There's one question for Professor Mishra.
Yes, I believe we're not able to connect with him. I asked if Professor Mishra, sir, are you with us? Okay, I believe. Okay, there's one more. Let's take the last question due to limitation of time. We have a question from Professor Tawfiq Siddiqui. He asks, in every sector, there is a role of private players. Earlier currency is controlled, cryptocurrency is that only. Your views about that, sir? Professor Arvind.
Yes. So apart from Bitcoin, there are other cryptocurrencies like Ripple and Ethereum and so on. So there is a role for the private sector, but ultimately governments also have a role, because almost by definition, nations will have their own currencies and they will want control over their currencies. A public blockchain takes control outside of the national borders. So no central government, whether it is the US government or the European Union or Germany or India or Japan or China, would like a private blockchain to be having a currency that is operating outside of the influence of the normal currency of the country. So at some point you will see different central banks rolling out their own blockchain. In fact, I know that the Reserve Bank of India is thinking about it. I know that the Federal Reserve Board of the US is thinking about it. I know that the European Central Bank is thinking about it. So we can expect official blockchain-based currencies also to come.
Okay, I think we're done with the question answer session. Thank you very much, Professor Sahai. Thank you very much, Professor Mishra, for very insightful addresses. I would now like to invite Dr. Arif from the Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management, NIT Srinagar, for the vote of thanks. Dr. Arif, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sadas. I'm switching on my camera, but it's not happening. But let's do it.
I can see you, Dr. Arif.
All right. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So I'd like to thank you for your insightful lecture, sir. The very first word of thanks, I'll give it to Professor Abdul Liman, sir, who is the head Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management. And I'd like to remind about, he quoted Winston Churchill for the perfection thing. So, sir, thank you for guiding us through. So, thank you for bringing us here, what we are today and where we are today. Thank you, Professor Abdul Liman. I'd like to thank Professor Professor Najibuddin, who's Dean RNC. Your views about the growing perspective in today's time, and how exactly you have said that we need to grow with time despite all the difficulties. Thank you for sharing your insights and your experience, sir. Thank you so much. We wanted to have Professor G.A. Harman, Ghulam Ashraful Harman, sir, but unfortunately he was not here, but he has made a lot of contribution for us. We would like to thank him, and we expect a very good recovery, very soon, early recovery for him, and we give him best wishes for his health. We'd like to thank Professor Rakesh Sehgal. There are so many things that we want to thank Professor Sehgal for all his motivation, for his guidance, for taking the lead. Thank you, Professor Rakesh Sehgal, not just for this conference, but also for the MBA program, for the MSc TIDE program, which is related with the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Program, for the IED Center in your guidance and in your esteemed leadership. We are able to get these things at NIT Srinagar. For the HULT Prize event, which is an international event that we have recently, succeeded to do with your guidance and your support. If anyone wants to watch that, we can watch at DD Kashmir. I'd like to thank Professor Prashant Mishra, sir, from IIM Calcutta. His views on localization, the globalization, and all the supply chain disruption was very much fruitful, and we can definitely go about finding certain insights from there. His understanding in the fintech area and the health tech area is definitely going to lead us through these tough times. His views on the struggle and his views on the adoption and the rate of adoption in the difficult times like COVID, we can definitely find some insights from there, and we can definitely go a long way. So one important point from Professor Prashant was safety. That safety is paramount. We should definitely go about encouraging people and doing our research in that area. Now, I'd like to thank Professor Arvind Sahai for his insightful lecture. And sorry about this, sir, that we mentioned it was a lecture. It was a keynote speech, very well addressed keynote speech. And thank you for that. Thank you for bringing the newest technology for us, the blockchain technology. And thank you for the special mention of my name and Dr. Sadaf's name. And your question was, can you trust me or not? You can definitely trust me, always, sir. Thank you for bringing the case that you are working on and that you have worked on, and the cases that you are working further related to HSBC. Your role of bringing this the role of blockchain technology in the contemporary times. Your insights on Bitcoin and blockchain amalgamation has opened a new domain for us, and we can definitely, from the perspective of researcher and from the perspective of an academician, we can definitely go on working with it. Your insights about bringing some scope through AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can definitely go a long way. Before ending it, I'd like to invite both Professor Arvind Sahai and Professor Prashant Mishra. I request both of you, who are the guests of honor for today's event, to be the mentor for our MBA programs. Sir, I'd like to invite you and Professor Mishra for being the mentor and lead us through in the difficult times, sir. How exactly we have just started, and we want you to be on board as the mentors for the MBA program. Your views, sir.
So, Dr. Arif, certainly happy to kind of explore the possibility. It will be a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I have never visited Srinagar before, so it will be an opportunity for me to visit Srinagar also. And also, I think one would like to contribute to the growth of an institution. for all of those reasons. So let us talk some more and see in what way one can make a contribution. I have also to share with you that my time is probably the most constrained resource that I have. So I'm not sure how much time, if at all, any that one can devote, but I would love to try. So let us talk. I will look forward to hearing from you or Dr. Firdaus or Dr. Liman or Dr. Najib or Dr. Sehgal to see what might be possible.
Thank you so much, sir. Even a single second will do wonders for our institution.
By the way, it was just a joke when I said whether I can trust you or not. I'm just using an example to kind of drive home a point.
It was an honor, sir. It was an honor.
You did not take that personally in any way.
Not at all, sir. Not at all.
So in fact, it was delightful for both of us when you mentioned our names in your example. So it was quite delightful. No offense, completely, not at all.
Thank you so much, sir. And Professor Prashant Mishra, sir, the same question to you. Your views, sir. Thank you. Your mentorship required. Your mic.
I echo what Arvind said, so we would be very happy if we can be of any value or we can contribute to the growth of the program or institution. You let us know that what do you expect from us. We would be very happy.
Sure, sir, definitely. My last vote of thanks to all the members of ICCBT, International Conference on Contemporary Business Trends, including Dr. Tahir, who is the backbone of this event. With his views and with his efforts, we are able to reach here. To Dr. Sadaf Firdaus for taking this event up to this level. I'd like to thank all the team members, all the faculty members, including the head, Professor Abdul Liman, Dr. Sheikh Shahid Sahab, Dr. Omar Mufid, Dr. Shahid Ali, Dr. Fauzia Jan. Thank you, everybody. And I'd like to thank all the members of the department as well as NIT Srinagar. And a special thanks to Professor Rakesh Sehgal for leading us through. And before I end, we have a next session which has to start at 12. We are right on time. Before ending, I'd like to remind about these sessions. The very next session is with Professor Pawan Mamidi. And after that, we'll be having a session at 6 p.m. in the evening with 5 eminent members. That will be a plenary session. So thank you all for joining this inaugural session. Now we are moving on to the next session with Professor Mamidi. We'll just start in the next 1 minute. Professor Mamidi, thank you for joining with us. I can see you that you are here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, very well. We can hear you.
Good.
So we'll just start with your introduction. We'll start, and for all the participants, you can join. And thank you, both the keynote speakers, for joining. Now we are moving on to the next session. This session is a special session, one special session with Professor Mamidi. I'd like to introduce him first. Professor Mamidi is an empirically informed advisor in the policy space and an occasional teacher while pursuing 2 streams of scholarship, law as well as law regulation and behavioral sciences. As the director of CSBC, Pawan is currently working closely with NITI Aayog to help set up a behavioral insights unit for India with the name Nudge Unit. He has taught law in relationship to new technologies over the years, both at IIMs as well as leading policy schools such as LBS and AA. And has thought deeply about antitrust, privacy, and intellectual property. While he is adept at applying behavioral science to the end of solving intractable policy problems, he is also skilled at designing experiments in behavioral economics and communicating the findings in a meaningful way to senior government officers in Delhi. He has recently involved in an influential study about nudging people towards making more privacy-conscious decisions in the digital world. Professor Pawan likes explaining complex ideas in a simpler manner and shuns postmodernism and any form of deliberate obscurantism. Professor Pawan takes an immense pride in cooking rural Telangana food, which he believes rightly so is vastly superior to Bengali food. Well, he has a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Oxford, a Master's LLM from Harvard Law School, highly subsidized and expensive Bachelor's in Mathematics from the finest public institution in the world, Osmania University. He has worked as Executive Director, Center for Social and Behavioral Change from September 2019 in New Delhi. He is Director, Center for Experimental Social Sciences, that's CES Nutfield Plain, from 2016 to 2019 for 3 years in Pune. Professor Pavan is graduate from IIM Ahmedabad, and he is a visiting professor at many schools, including the Michigan Law School at University of Michigan, and he has been professor at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, IIM Bangalore. So, sir, we are happy to have you with us. We have your presentation as well. The moment you are ready, we can share your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That was a long introduction to a very small person. I'm also glad that you mentioned that I enjoy cooking, which is one of my pastimes. Thank you for having me, and I'd be happy if you can load my presentation.
Sure, sir. It will just take a minute.
Sure. Take your time. I have all the time for you. Perfect.
Please guide me through, and I'll.
Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, you can stop here for a moment, and I can.
Just a moment, sir.
Just stop at the second slide.
Yes, sir.
So, first of all, my deepest gratitude to the entire faculty at NIT. It's such a pleasure. I could never visit Kashmir in my life. It's been a big dream, but at least through this new online means, I'm able to connect with Kashmir, hopefully in a meaningful manner. My immense gratitude to my friend Tahir, whom I have known for several years now. He visited us at IIM Ahmedabad, where we had extensive opportunities to discuss behavioral science and experimental methods. And I'm delighted to see him as one of your esteemed faculty members here. So it also makes me very proud. So let me break down this conversation. I have 30 minutes into a couple of components. At the very outset, I'm going to introduce who we are and what we do, and I might also mention a proposal that I have for NIT to possibly set up a behavioral insights unit in Kashmir. But who are we? So, CSBC stands for Center for Social and Behavior Change. It was founded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it's placed out of Ashoka University. So we are essentially Ashoka University. And we work very closely with the central government. We work with NITI Aayog, and our ambition is quite a historical one. We are setting up India's first nudge unit. Nudge units sprang up all over the world on account of the really influential book that the Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler at the University of Chicago and Cass Sunstein at Harvard Law School wrote about a decade ago, called Nudge, which talked about how one may apply behavior science in getting people to change their behavior, hopefully for the better. You can, of course, also use nudge theory to nudge people in the wrong direction, but we can talk about the ethical aspects later. Let's just focus our attention on the science today. So CSBC was founded with a view to employing behavior science in changing behavior. We have partnerships, as you can see here, with the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. We have just signed an MOU with the University of Chicago Booth Center for Decision Research, which is Richard Thaler's lab, after he visited us last year. And we also have working relationships with the Yale School of Management and Oxford. let me sort of get into a little bit about why behavior science and why behavior science is interesting and why behavioral economics has made such a huge impact. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Um, so behavioral economics is really about human irrationality, right? I mean, and there is a sort of a very deliberate and a very detailed process by which you can try and understand human behavior, and we adopt what is called as the 5-step process. I mean, we go into the field, we try and define a problem. For instance, if the broad area of our problem is the prevalence of anemia among pregnant women in society. So we try to define that problem in a much more sharper manner. We try to call it, we try to reduce it to how do we get pregnant women to take iron and folic acid tablets, for instance. So that's the defined states. Then we go into the diagnose phase where we go into the ground, where we go into the field and undertake extensive qualitative work with a view to understanding the nuances present in our culture, present in our behaviors, which would not ordinarily be picked up by quantitative methods. So we do the diagnose phase and we come back with a lot of perspectives, we come back with a lot of data to the center. And then we get into the design phase where we then design policy interventions which can respond to either of two things. In the qualitative phase, in the diagnose phase, we pick up what are called as barriers to change. Why doesn't somebody do what he or she is supposed to do? I mean, for instance, a smoker is not supposed to smoke. So what is the barrier to a smoker giving up smoking? That would be a barrier. So we try to respond to barriers. We also try to leverage the facilitators, which can help the appropriate change. So that's where we begin to actually come up with policy interventions which can potentially have an impact. Then what we do is at the next stage, we try and test these using lab in the field experiments. I will, when we have time, I can perhaps explain what an experiment is, but behavioral economists use experimental methods to sort of tease out the causal relationships between, independent variables that we observe in society and the desired outcome that we are trying to accomplish. And then after the test phase, if we find that some of these interventions are working in a small microcosm, then what we do is we basically scale it up to a higher platform at to the government level, where to a district level or to a state level, where hopefully the interventions will produce the kinds of change that we want to see. So this is sort of the process view of how we discover knowledge and create new interventions and apply it in society. But let me return to the question that I started off with, which is what is behavior economics? Why did behavior economics become so important in recent times? Next slide, please. Let me start off with a very simple example here. If I were to present to you this image comprised of two tables, this is an image that I borrowed from Max Bezeman's book on judgment and decision making. Now, you must know that 85% of our cognitive resources are used by our visual senses. And if I were to ask you which of these two tables is larger, you get a bunch of responses. There are some who would say that the table on the left is longer than the one on the right, and the one on the right is wider than the one on the left, and so on. Right? So, in some sense, if we were asked to make a decision very quickly, we are likely to come up with a bunch of responses. Next slide, please. Now, if we were to stop depending on this sort of eyeballing, intuitive, quick method and apply a very deliberate and a very systematic process by which we test which table is bigger, then you might undertake something. You might undertake a process that is represented in this image, and you discover that the tables are actually of identical size, right? So, in some sense, our brains our brain is undertaking either of two types of operations. On one hand, it can undertake a very intuitive and a very quick response to the situation kind of an operation, which can produce certain kinds of problems, right? But then there is a more deliberate method of thinking, which can lead the brain to making perhaps more accurate judgments and decisions. So the deliberate process of actually comparing them physically is the more sort of process-oriented way of arriving at a decision. These two methods are called systems 1 and systems 2. Systems 1 is the quick way of jumping at conclusions, whereas systems 2 is a more slow and a more laborious way of arriving at decisions. Right? Let me give you another example to illustrate this. If you were to take a walk in your backyard, on your lawn, and you see an object which is sinusoidal in shape, you jump back without even thinking. You believe that it's a snake and you want to avoid the danger. Now that kind of a response, that kind of a quick response is called systems 1. But if you were to pause for a brief moment of time and go through statistics of the number of objects which are lying in grass, which are potentially snakes, you would come up with a different answer altogether. The likelihood of every sinusoidal object being a snake is very, very low. And even assuming that it were a snake, the likelihood of it being a poisonous snake is also pretty damn low. So systems 2 gives you a certain kind of an answer, and systems 1 gives you a different kind of an answer. And there can be a great deal of divergence between these two. So that's the sort of the first thing that you need to bear in mind. Next slide, please. I don't need to go through this example. I think I have already sort of in some sense tried to talk about the difference between systems 1 and 2. So next slide, please. So now let us pause for a moment to try and relate the systems 1 and system 2 type of thinking to how economics has done its business over the last 60, 70 years since it's become a science. The neoclassical approach to economics assumed that the human brain is always likely to engage a systems 2 approach to making decisions. Right? It imagines that the human brain is a purely rational machine. It's a rational processor, and that it will always arrive at accurate answers, accurate decisions, and so on. Now, this is something that Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the two really famous psychologists, disputed. They said, listen, human beings are capable of rationality, they're capable of systems 2, but merely because you're capable of systems 2 doesn't mean that you're always engaging in systems 2. Right? So there are times that you can be engaging in systems 1, and systems 1 can take you very far away from the kinds of decisions that you would make if you were to use systems 2. So this divergence between systems 1 and systems 2 was highlighted by the behavioral economists. They said the mere capacity doesn't mean that you always engage in it. So another simple example would be the mere fact that you can run doesn't mean that you always run. You can also walk. So that's the difference that we need to think about. So what do we mean by rationality? Which rationality sort of epitomizes what we mean by systems 2. Rationality in economics has meant a variety of things. It has meant selfishness, maximization of wealth, or to the extent that you don't even look at other people. That's one view of rationality. That's an extreme view of rationality. Then there's also the principle of non-contradiction. That's also used to describe what rationality is. Third, you can also apply, what in mathematics is known as the principle of transitivity to describe rationality. What it simply means to say is that if I like bananas more than oranges and oranges more than mangoes, I would be expected to like bananas more than mangoes. But human behavior is not necessarily transitive in its preferences. It can like mangoes more than bananas, right? So the lack of transitivity is also another particular deviation from this expectation that we always make decisions in a purely rational manner. Human beings are also not completely selfish. They're somewhat selfish, but they can also be selfless. They can be loving. They can act in a manner which rewards other people, which can increase the wealth of other people, and so on, to their own detriment, oftentimes. So, so this is where the big challenge in economics came up. It came up from the psychologists who said, listen, I mean, when we go out into the real world, human beings are not behaving always in a rational manner, right? And this is something that we need to understand. This is something that we need to study and apply in the way we change the world. So let me give you one example to illustrate how this plays out in the real world. Consider for a moment the phenomena of diarrhea. This is an example that I'm borrowing from this really noted economist called Sendil Mullainathan, who's at the University of Chicago. Imagine, a lot of children in this country get diarrhea. What is diarrhea? Diarrhea, if you were to have a mental model of what diarrhea is, it is a human body, a little child, and leaking liquid continuously, right? It's kind of graphic, but it's gross, but you got to acknowledge it. It's important to acknowledge it. So you have a mental model that the liquid is leaving the body. And the response of parents oftentimes, when they see their own child suffering from diarrhea, is to stop pouring any liquid into the child. In other words, they stop hydrating the child. And this is one of the major reasons why there is a lot of death attached to the phenomenon of diarrhea. So, in other words, by conforming to a defective mental model, you have strayed away from what really happens, what really could potentially be causing the harm to the child, right? So we need to start challenging the mental models that we have in our brain for us to be able to come up with solutions that can potentially work. So one of the things that doctors would tell you is that if a child has diarrhea, continue hydrating the child. Stopping the hydration of the child is likely to put the life of the child in great danger. So this is a real world example, but one needs to go out and understand this phenomenon. You can't just dismiss it as a form of irrationality, and these people are irrational merely because they are poor, and therefore, they're allowed to, in some sense, to suffer, right? Because they lack the rationality. It is well worth adding here that this form of irrationality is not merely a phenomena exhibited by those who have not had an opportunity to have a proper education. A lot of us, with very high qualifications even, can become subject to systems one type of decision making and the faults associated with systems one type of decision making. Let me next slide, please. So another sort of big theory that behavioral economics came up with is prospect theory. Next slide, please. And let's pause on this slide. What prospect theory tells us is that the way we weigh gains is different from the way we weigh losses. This is one of the sort of the central theory of behavioral economics, and it can be applied in the way we try and change the behavior of individuals. So what does it tell us? It tells us that, imagine if you were to receive $10 of benefits. The amount of pleasure that you get from the $10, let us say, is X. But if you were to lose $10, the amount of loss of happiness from that loss is likely to be greater than X. So in other words, there is no symmetry between gains and losses in terms of the amount of pleasure that you get or the amount of pleasure that you lose. And that's why this curve looks the way it does. It's not a smooth curve. At the point zero, there's a bit of a kink, right? And when you look to the lower left quadrant, you realize that the rate at which your happiness or your utility drops for a small piece of loss is much higher than the gain that you would enjoy if you were to benefit from it. Now, this behavioral understanding, this understanding of human decision making is very, very important. It can be used in a variety of ways. So, for instance, if you were to frame a message, right, as a loss and not as a benefit, then it might be able to lead to an appropriate change, right? So it's not, so if you were designing a communication strategy, you might it might be worth considering that you should frame that communication strategy as a loss framing rather than as a gain framing, right? Let's go a little further. Next slide, please. So now we come to one of the important things that behavioral economists do and that policymakers are also expected to do, and that is go out into the field and evaluate how human beings behave. And there are a variety of ways of doing this. I mean, you can go out and have conversations with people, try and understand what they're doing. That's one way of doing it. It's the qualitative way. Then there is another way of doing it, which is you administer a survey and you get a lot of data, come back home, and then you run your statistical regressions, and then you find correlations between two variables which suggest that, there is some kind of a relationship between two entities. But the third method, which is the experimental method, is one of the most profound methods of discovering causal relationships between two things, right? So if, for instance, you want to be able to say with some amount of certainty that the consumption of aspirin is likely to reduce your headache, you can demonstrate it using experiments. So how might this experiment look like? So you take a sample of 100 people with headaches, you randomize them into two groups. One group you give them an aspirin, and the other group you give them a placebo or maybe a sugar pill, right? And if you discover that the group that has been given the aspirin experiences a lower level of headache, then you are able to confirm that indeed it's the aspirin alone which has led to this outcome and nothing else, because you have basically created these groups which are almost identical to each other. So the method of randomizing, the method of separating these two groups and creating nearly identical groups is the sort of one of the key ways in which we are able to associate a relationship, a causal relationship between the intervention and the outcome. So this is a very powerful methodology. This is a very powerful tool. And this is exactly what behavioral labs do in different parts of the world. When I mentioned the nudge unit, this is one of the things that a nudge unit can do. It has a lab. A nudge unit can have a lab. It can go out and test little interventions to see whether they're working or not. And marketing people have used what they call as A/B testing. An A/B test is nothing but an experiment, right? So I thought it worth mentioning one of the core engines of behavioral economics, which becomes then a pathway to the kinds of changes that we want to produce in society. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, so this is an example of the lab that we have. This is a mobile lab. It's a bus. We have fitted it with computers. We can take it into a field. We can take it into a low-income neighborhood. We can take it into a sugarcane field. We can pretty much take this bus anywhere. And what we basically do is we have taken the seats out of the bus. We have fitted the bus with little computers. Wherever we go, we get real subjects to go and sit in the bus, and then we run experiments. And we have a global team of experimenters running these experiments. And these tell us how people are behaving, right? So this, I just wanted to show you an example of what a lab could look like. You can have a lab in your university. You can have a lab you can create a behavioral lab at NIT, which can be an exciting way for a lot of researchers there to study human behavior, right? Next slide, please. So let me now quickly run through a couple of projects that we have been working on to give you a flavor of how we apply behavioral science to changing behavior. So here, the problem statement is Anemia. What is anemia? Anemia is a physical condition of weakness caused by iron deficiency in the human body. So now the objective is to get people to consume iron, and it's not an easy thing to get people to consume iron. And in particular, pregnant women are have this problem of anemia, and you need to get them to take IFA pills. But the challenge of getting pregnant women in villages, etc., to take iron pills is not an easy one. Why, you might ask? So, what are the? Let's, for instance, go through one or two barriers to this change. First of all, they might just forget, right? I mean, we are busy in our lives, and women are much busier than men. They work really hard, and they might just forget. So how do you overcome the forgetfulness part of it? So that's a barrier. The second interesting barrier that we discovered with regard to the consumption of IFA pills is the fact that IFA pills produce a set of side effects. They produce nausea, they produce a form of giddiness and so on, right? Now, the moment you feel the nausea, the moment you feel slightly sick after taking the pill, makes you want to give it up. And that's exactly what happens. A lot of these women take one or two tablets once or twice, and that's it, and they stop because they feel that they're falling sick. The reality is, when they're falling sick during the temporary period of time, it's an indication that the pills are actually working. Right? So here is a very interesting paradox. And this paradox can be explained by what is called as the Dettol phenomenon. I'm sure a lot of you have used Dettol as an antiseptic. When you open the cap of a bottle of Dettol, it smells obnoxious, right? And now, how might you interpret the foulness of the smell of Dettol? You can say, I don't want to use this because it smells foul. But what if you were to reframe the foulness as evidence that it is actually working? So is there a way that we can go and talk to these women and manage their perception of side effects and say that the side effects are actually pieces of evidence that the medicine is working? You might be able to help overcome that particular barrier. So that's exactly what we are trying to do, right? Now, how about the forgetfulness part? How do you get people to stop forgetting to take their pills? There are wonderful little devices that can be used. You can give a calendar, for instance. We designed a calendar where the woman could scratch off a spot on the calendar, and it would reveal the picture of a beautiful baby. And that then becomes a reminder. It's a micro incentive for the woman to scratch it off, and that becomes a reminder that she has to take a pill. Right? So you can test little things which can have a pronounced effect in terms of the outcome and desirable and the desired behavior. So why don't I pause here? I may have covered my 20 minutes, and we can have 10 minutes of Q&A if that's all right.
Yes, sir, that's no problem. You can.
How much time have I consumed already?
Sir, 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I've finished my 30 minutes. I mean,
no, not an issue. We can have another 5 minutes. That's not
feel free to stop me, or feel free to continue the conversation.
Please continue, sir. We will see in the meantime.
Okay, so why don't we open it up for some questions? I've said a lot. I would much rather that some of you speak now and perhaps raise questions, and we can have a conversation.
Sure, sir. Participants, please, you may post your question in the chat box, or you can directly ask here. Thank you.
Sir, this is Tahir here. So,
Yeah,
actually,
Tahir.
sir, we have been working on a couple of projects at NIT Srinagar about conflict-induced behavior of entrepreneurs who are working in the state of J&K. And I think we have always felt a need of a behavioral lab where we could actually see how the conflict is changing the behavior of the people, because it's very difficult to actually measure the behavior. So, is there any way or
Yes,
any?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I think it's a great question. So, Tahir, conflict is not an easy thing. Conflict reduces or it imposes a tremendous cognitive load on the human brain, right? Imagine that the human brain is like a computer and you have opened multiple screens on your computer. Now, the number of screens that you have opened, number of tabs that you have opened on your computer increases the amount of load that you impose on the processor. So cognitive brain is essentially, cognitive load is essentially that. It is the weight that the brain is lifting. And every human brain has a finite capacity. And conflict imposes a tremendous amount of load on the human brain. Now, when there is a load on the human brain, the brain tends to make the decisions which are not necessarily always rational. There's this wonderful by the economist Sendil Mullainathan and the psychologist Eldar Shafir called Scarcity. And Scarcity talks about exactly this. It says that when people are poor, right, they have a brain as good as yours and yours and mine. But the thing is, the fact that they have to be thinking about their next meal introduces a cognitive load which leads them to make systematically irrational decisions which perpetuates poverty. So I can imagine how conflict imposes a tremendous amount of cognitive load on people who are exposed to it. Right? So how can we adopt practices which help people overcome this cognitive load? That is going to be a key challenge in this research. So it's certainly something that we should think about, something that we should research. And as I said earlier, Tahir, we have now a request from the government of J&K to start a behavioral insights unit in J&K, and I've been telling BMGF that we should start it out of NIT because we have friends there now. So I would love to start this lab there. We will get the resources. You don't need to worry about the resources. We will get the resources, and if NIT is willing to undertake this kind, setting up this kind of a lab, we would be happy to facilitate that.
Definitely, sir. I think we have our HOD here as well as our Dean, Academic Affairs, and they will agree with me that our HOD is there, Professor Liman.
Good afternoon, Professor Pawan. I'm
Good
Dr.
afternoon, Professor.
I'm
Good
Liman.
afternoon, Dr. Liman. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, sir. Same here. Actually, we will love to have this lab here.
Very good.
Welcome this.
I will get the needed resources. BMGF has approached me and said we should set this up in Kashmir. So, I mentioned this to Tahir. Let's do some research. Let's do some empirical work, especially on the adverse impacts of conflict on human decision making.
Sir,
I think it's a great area.
The plus point is that our department is actually the Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management. So there's an amalgam of all three things where we can actually read behavior of the people and do research about it.
Fantastic. I would love to support it, and I will get the needed resources. I just need a place where we can set up this lab, where we can set up, funds for research and so on. We will be happy to come and have a discussion with you on this.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Professor Pawan, for this wonderful opportunity to have this lab to be set up in NIT Srinagar, and thank you for all the contribution that you'll be making. And we'd really love to be the host as well as to be the contributors in that field, in the field of behavioral science. Though we have some more questions, but I don't want to stretch it for long because we are having our paper presentation. Just one question from Nikita Tyagi that we are having: how has behavioral economics influenced or contributed towards framing of public policies? Just last question, and then we'll move on to the next session.
So we are setting up nudge units. I'll give you one example from the UK of how behavioral economics has helped in tax collection. Tax collection, people don't pay taxes, and the government sends letters saying that you haven't paid taxes. They had a very simple intervention. The intervention introduced one line which said, the tax has been paid by 85% of the population, and you belong to the 15% that has not paid. Right? This one little line increased the tax payments by close to 42%. Right? Now, you might wonder, this seems like common sense. It's not common sense, really. What you have basically done is you have used a norm to get a person to change the behavior. The devil is really in the detail. Why do you think a person is more persuaded to pay taxes when they read a line like that? It is because they don't want to belong to a group that that is behaving badly. And when somebody points it out, they're likely to change their behavior. So merely asking somebody to pay tax may not produce the result. But if you can word your communication in a behaviorally sensitive manner, you might be able to produce a reaction. Let me give you another example. A hospital was found, with low hygiene standards. People were not washing their hands at the sink. They simply put an image of two eyes on top of the sink. It's not a real person. It's just an image of two eyes. And guess what? That shot up the likelihood of people washing hands in the bathroom. The reason being, they felt that they were being watched. It's a subliminal thing. Right? So if you can leverage these cognitive tools and mechanisms by which you can get people to do what they should be doing, such as road behavior, road rage, bad behavior on the roads, streets, tax payments, health behavior. There are a wide variety of areas where behavior science can be used to get people to do good things. Let me pause there.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining with us with NIT Srinagar, with ICCBT. And we had a great lecture from you. We had a great insight regarding the behavioral science and the use of this particular behavioral science in the domain of academia as well as among the society. Thank you so much for joining with us. And we'd like to keep your association with you for a long time, for a long time rather. And now we'll be moving on to the next session, which is a technical session for marketing. I hope you are able to hear me, sir. The screen has frozen. Professor Mamidi, can you hear me? Dr. Tahir, can you hear me?
Yes, I think we can continue to our next session.
Yes, we can. Please, you can directly communicate with Professor Mamidi. All right. Now we are moving on to the next session for all the participants. This is a technical session now, which will be headed by. All right, Professor Mamidi, thank you for joining with us. This is what I was telling. And now we are moving on to the next session. We are now moving on to the next session, which is the technical session for the track Marketing 1. All the participants who are here, we can start with the presentation. Yes, thank you. Rest of the people, they can either leave or they can silently observe the presentation here. This technical session will be chaired by Professor Reshma Nasreen, and it will be co-chaired by Dr. Sadaf Firdaus. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Dr. Sadaf, please.